Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, episode 99.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Bosk, St. Petersburg, and in the Carcassonne Gold Rush. We have a variance discussion of Hero Realms and Star Realms, and we're putting Hero Realms on tap, and we talk about what breweries do with their spent grain after they've brewed their beer. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future, and it works to take a mile.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Maybe reusing things in interesting ways?
Certainly. We've got a variance discussion, which is discussing how the variants in Hero Realms and Star Realms are pretty similar. And that could be considered a reuse since they're from the same publisher.
Okay.
And we're talking about spent grains, which is all about reusing stuff. After you've brewed your beer with your grains, you have to do something with them, right?
Got to do something with it. You can't just throw it out.
You could just throw it out.
Yeah, just don't use it.
But it's a big waste, and it's a huge impact on local landfills, because even though grains do break down over time, the amount of grain you're talking about in some circumstances is just a huge amount.
Well, we will obviously be getting back to that at the end of the episode, but as this is the beginning of the episode, I feel like we should start like we usually do, and thank all of our wonderful listeners for joining us again this week. If this is your first episode of Draft Mechanic, thanks for tuning in. You can find us on the internet, draftmechanic.net, at Draft Mechanic on all your usual social media sites, so on and so forth, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. I don't have any of the other cool new things that the kids are using, so we're just going to stick with those three for now.
That is such a lie. You definitely have some
Not for the podcast.
Okay, fair enough. We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode as there is for every episode. So if we're talking about something and you want to share your opinions on that, that is the place to do it.
Yes, and if you are a Board Game Geek user, we do have a micro badge available. We are trying to get to 100 micro badgers before episode 100. We are at 96. We need 4 people to pick up the micro badge before next episode's 100. These 6 people joined in: Cassidy Thomas, Jake Sherman, Jen B., Carl Smelser, Gates Dowd, and Peter Ellis. Thank you all so much for grabbing the Draft Mechanic micro badge. If you need the Geek Gold, by the way, we have tons. We would love to give you Geek Gold to show off the Draft Mechanic micro badge. You can just join us in the guild. There's a pinned thread for that. And then you have a nice little badge, and you can have it on your profile.
And you guys can make Jake happy because he really wants this.
I want it to happen.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we have some real in-person meetups that are happening twice a month. We have one on the first Thursday of every month at Good Road Cider Works, and that is our next one that is coming up on 5/2. So if you are in the area, we'd love to see you at that. And then we have one on the third Tuesday of every month, which is going to be at Salud Cerveceria in the Noda neighborhood. But if you are in town on 5/2, come see us at Good Road.
Yes, and you can also find events posted on Facebook, and also if you go to boardgames.beer/events, that will go to the page that has all of our events, including the info for the Geekway bottle share that we are hosting with Mile High Game Guys. So if you want to come to that thing, it's on
also
there.
draftmechanic.net/events, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It is both.
Just checking.
I just like to throw boardgames.beer/events. It's fun to have that website. I'm very pleased we have that website. So yeah, next episode is episode 100, and before we get into the games, just want to kind of throw this out there. I'm going to put a guild thread up, and also on the Slack we'll have a place for it, but we want to do a listener Q&A. If you've ever had any questions you've ever wanted to ask us about board games or craft beer or about our cat, we can absolutely answer any and all of those questions as long as they make sense and are good for a podcast and would be fun to discuss. But please, we would love to do this. We did one back in episode 50. We had a lot of fun with it. And if you have any late pressing questions or even just random thoughts about what my favorite shape of French fry is, I will tell you it's curly fries. And then the Bojangles fries are also very good as well. So yeah, you can find that on the internet, all of our typical social media places. We would love to have some questions as we roll into episode 100 next episode.
My current question is, why has the live studio cat decided that right now is the moment he needs to get on my lap?
Because any time whatsoever passed and the cat was in the room, therefore you have a cat on you now. That's how this is always going to work. From the dawn of podcast to the end of podcast, the live studio cat will join you for the recording.
Fair enough. Let's move on to some actual games talk.
Let's move on. Danielle, do you have the Kickstarter updates for us?
I certainly do.
That's good, because it's in your hand.
Yeah. Glenmore 2 Chronicles from Funtails has funded at 193,850 euros of its 35,000 euro goal. That is 3,656 backers, and it reached all of the stretch goals that they had set for.
Nice.
So that is going to be everything they've got for it when it ships out to backers.
Each and every chronicle.
Tsukiyumi from Grey Fox Games has funded at $640,252 of its $150,000 goal, with 4,254 backers.
Mm-hmm. I'm really happy about that one. They, really wanted to have a big success here. It looks like this game is taken off. And I did notice, by the way, you can late pledge on the Grey Fox Games website. I was just checking that earlier.
Gartenbau, which we talked about, I believe, in last episode from Fisher Heaton Games, has canceled their Kickstarter. I know they are looking to rework that and come back with that game because they are very excited about it still, but the Kickstarter just wasn't going the way that they had hoped, so they're going to make some tweaks to everything and hopefully come back with that a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
TC Petty 3's Handsome from Button Shy Games has funded at $9,766 of its $1,000 goal with 617 backers. And Freshwater Fly from Bellwether Games, which we had a Kickstarter preview of, is funding currently at $65,279 of its $24,000 goal. They've got 883 backers, and this campaign is still running, actually. It is running until this Thursday. If you're listening to this when it drops, so that's 4/25, and it's running until 9 p.m. Eastern Time. They've also unlocked their solo adventure mode, which they just announced fairly recently. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't checked back on the Kickstarter and you were interested in solo play of this game, go check it out, because it's kind of like a cool fishing trip campaign thing they've got going.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how this works out. Having a solo mode for this game is something I didn't expect, and even then putting it on this kind of like campaign-ish fishing trip scenario seems like a really awesome step, and I'm super excited to give that a shot when we do get a copy of Freshwater Fly.
Definitely works thematically.
Mm-hmm. So, would you like to hear about new campaigns?
I suppose.
Danielle, all of these are about science fiction spacey topics. I'm sorry. It's one of those moments in Kickstarter where like everything is hitting on the same kind of theme. In fact, 2 of these are taking place on the same planet. I guess technically they all are taking place on Earth because we're, in the physical. Thematically, they take place on Mars. So the very first one I have to talk about is the new expansion for Terraforming Mars. It's called Turmoil, coming from Stronghold Games. Yes?
They're kickstarting this?
We can definitely talk about that in a bit.
Cool.
So yeah, Terraforming Mars Turmoil is funding currently at $718,000 of its $20,000 goal with almost 16,000 backers. This Kickstarter is ending on Thursday, May 2nd, with an estimated delivery of November of this year, hopefully by Essen is what they're hoping. You can pledge it for $34 for the expansion, or if you want to get every Terraforming Mars item together, it's $139.
That's actually quite a good value.
Uh-huh. So you get the base game, you get all 5 expansions, and then the stretch goals from this campaign for $139. So Turmoil is actually a pretty sizable expansion. It adds in 2 modules. One of them is the events thing that we thought when we first heard it announced. Basically, you have a sideboard with these event cards that are going to come out, and you'll be able to see what's coming in the future. So you'll have like 2 generations ahead, know what kind of event is coming down. And then the other module is kind of like a political lobbying area control board, which when you think of it as political lobbying, you think, oh, great, we're going to bring in like player diplomacy and all this crap. But it really just looks like an area control thing off to the side that gives you some special perks or something. If you're like, if I'm the eco people, then I can do trees better. And then whoever's the most in control party is going to have a global effect for everything as well. So it's not like a political drama thing so much as it is an area control for powers, which I like better than it could have been. Like, I'm glad that this is not some super like heavily political influence dealing and wheeling kind of deal expansion.
I'm not gonna lie, if you said to me it's a science fiction themed game, if I didn't already know that Terraforming Mars is an amazing game, I'd be like, you're kind of losing me on the theme. And then if you said we're adding political lobbying to that, you would have completely lost me on the theme. So it is a good thing this is already a well-tested game.
Yeah, this is definitely the expansion you want to have late in the expansion cycle, because I have a feeling if this one was early, you would have lost people early on in the expansion chronology. But I'm actually kind of interested in this. I am interested more than I expected it once I looked at the way that particular political lobbying thing works. And more Terraforming Mars is nice. But you did talk about why is this on Kickstarter? Because this is something that Stronghold Games has not really done, with the exception of, I think, the Space Cadets Away missions, the miniatures game that they had a long time ago. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that they are now joined with Indie Boards and Cards, which has very much relied on Kickstarter a lot throughout the years. And you can't really fault them for the obviously great publicity that they're getting from this. We're talking about it. We're talking about it here in addition to when it was announced a month or two ago. And they've earned over $700,000 with a week to go on this thing. That's a lot of funds and a lot of capital to get this thing a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad decision for them to have put it on Kickstarter. It's just a weird choice for a game that has gone straight to retail with a base game and 4 expansions so far. It seems like a weird time to be like, hey, let's put this on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean, and it has to be done just for hype. Obviously, they could produce this thing if they wanted without too much trouble. I mean, I say obviously without knowing the interior information about the company, but it seems like it would be a thing that they could easily produce.
The other thing that this makes me kind of wonder about is, are they just trying to get an idea of how big of a production run they need to run? Because obviously, if you put something straight to retail, you make your production run based on, for an expansion, how many of the base copies you've sold and how many of the prior expansions you've sold. But you're still just guessing, really. Yeah. Whereas with Kickstarter, at least you have a count for how many you need to produce. And if that number is bigger than you would have guessed, you're actually going to do yourself a business service, because you'll be able to get that out to everybody who wanted it originally, and nobody will be complaining, oh, it was sold out at my spot, I wasn't able to get in on that first printing. So everybody who wants it will have it immediately and can begin using it. And if they think it's a good expansion, which obviously the producer would, they'll hope that those people will enjoy that and want to get the 6th expansion, which we know is a thing.
Yeah, it is coming eventually. I think that that's a really good point. And for something like this, where you're thinking about it in terms of a print run that is going to have 4 zeros at the end of it, which is way bigger than a lot of games' prints runs. Even a game as big as Terraforming Mars, I wouldn't be surprised if Colonies or even the boards, maybe those were a little more conservative numbers that they did for those first printings. But knowing that we're in the Kickstarter here and they're at 16,000 people that are going to be getting this expansion, I would assume that they're going to go with a print run of maybe even double that, because a lot of people are probably looking at it and saying, I don't really want it on the Kickstarter.
Well, that number is also going to jump up in the last 48 hours, as all Kickstarters do, when people get that notification, hey, you flagged this, go back it before it ends.
Well, I put a star on it, and I'm going to go back and look at it at that 48-hour mark, too.
I'd also be really curious to see how many of their backers are backing just the expansion and how many are getting that bundle that has everything involved in it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And looking at the Kickstarter page right now, it does actually list how many backers we have. So if I've got, let's see, it was
15,400?
Yeah, 15,494 backers. How many people do you think are backing for just the expansion right now?
You said it's the second most popular pledge?
No, just the expansion is the most popular. Oh, everything at all is the second most popular.
10,000?
Yeah, 12,735 people just for the expansion. And then looking at the everything ever is 1,500 backers right now. So, I mean, a lot of people that have Terraforming Mars are jumping on this expansion because, A, they want to get that expansion first because, got to have this thing. And B, it does have not a stretch goal, but a promo bit that you get in there that is something that's been requested for a very long time. They are including, as added promo that you'll apparently be able to purchase later, I guess, dual-layer player boards for Terraforming Mars.
That train's kind of left the station already, right?
Yeah, I'm super glad that they're doing this because that's a component that's been super requested, but you can also buy probably 50 or 60 different third-party ones. We have some nice wooden ones that came from Etsy, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that didn't get, third-party player boards, and it would probably be nice to have something with the official graphics on it, I guess, also. There's also going to be a bundle of additional cards. You obviously get your different promo corporations and promo contract cards, stuff like that with this that I guess are available elsewhere. Probably. I know that you can generally pick up promo cards at conventions, stuff like that, off the BGG store, etc.
Are the player boards an add-on to the expansion pledge, or are they part of it?
Yeah, they are part of the expansion pledge.
Okay, I guess that's a good thing. If you didn't want to spend the money on those player boards, it either wasn't as annoying to you as it is to some people, and you just didn't care enough to go out and spend extra money. And a lot of those were like $10 a board, so if you're talking 5 people, that can get costly. That's another game, essentially. But I think at this point, anybody who is so bothered by it that they absolutely had to have a dual layer player board has solved that problem 2 or 3 expansions ago.
Mm-hmm. So this is on Kickstarter now, obviously. I'm probably going to end up backing it just because then you get the additional corporations. I think that's like the number one thing that I'm most excited about is to get more corporations. I don't really need a whole bunch of additional project cards that may or may not ever come up, but the corporations are always fun to have. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to get a thing mailed to you in the mail, I guess. I don't know. I'm splitting hairs here on this. But yeah, Terraforming Mars Turmoil, it's available now, $34 on Kickstarter.
One thing I will say is if you don't have Terraforming Mars and you would like to get it, this sounds like a great time to get in on it because you're getting a good deal on everything up to this point. Plus you get those dual layer player boards, so you have them from the very first time that you play the game.
Yeah, $140 all in is a pretty dang good deal on a game that is probably more than people want to spend.
Certainly.
Yes. Moving on, I'm going to continue going on Mars. Is that okay?
Certainly.
Good, because this next game is called On Mars. This is coming from Eagle Gryphon Games, and this is the latest from Vital Lacerda. It's the big box with Ian O'Toole artwork. It is currently funding at $579,000 of its $100,000 goal with 6,153 backers. This one ends on Friday, May 3rd, with an estimated delivery of October 29 of this year. That's really quick. But I kind of believe it because we just got Escape Plan in the mail last week from the Kickstarter August of last year, and it delivered 2 months early. So Eagle Gryphon's got their pipeline down, it looks like. It's $89 to back on Mars, plus there's options to get all the different combo packs with other Vital Lacerda Eagle Gryphon games. You can get all 5 of those big box games for $571. And what to say, it's a Vital Lacerda game with Ian O'Toole artwork, and it's on Mars. This is something that's been coming for a year or two now since they announced it, and this one is going to have all your typical resource gathering, building colonies, building machines, and doing all that kind of resource colony management. You're all working together to build the colony, but you also all want your own personal points. It honestly looks like a heavier Terraforming Mars, which is not a huge surprise. It's like a heavier version of that kind of engine building machine and colony building system, except you're doing a colony instead of the whole planet.
I also can't help but notice that Eagle Gryphon Games is really using that bright orange, bright blue color palette again. They got it for Escape Plan on the box, and now they're using it for On Mars. So maybe that's Ian O'Toole's new thing.
I don't know. I mean, all of the art and the production on these games has been stunning. This one looks fabulous as well. And from what I've heard from people who've played it, Paul Grogan at Gaming Rules has been working. He's credited on the box as, rulebook development for this one and Escape Plan. He did the how to play and a full playthrough video that's up on their Kickstarter and also on his YouTube channel right now. So super important to go check that stuff out if you want to see how this game looks. But he's talks it up. He says it's really dang good, and I'm not surprised. I feel like this combo of people has really refined the system of making these super heavy, well, quote-unquote, super heavy games that have really great thematic tie-ins. We were big fans of Vinos. We're super excited to bust into Escape Plan, The Gallerist, Lisboa. We have all those that we're hoping to get to this year. And On Mars is something that fits me pretty much like a glove. It's a heavier game that's science fiction-y with amazing art.
Okay, I know Escape Plan had been a little less heavy than some of his other games. Is this going back towards the heavy end of the spectrum?
Yeah, it looks that way.
Okay.
So, back in the Vinos kind of heavy-ish stuff. I'm super excited. And they also, during the Kickstarter, they announced that there was going to be a big box expansion for On Mars coming to Kickstarter 2020. They're just kind of teasing it right now. And the thing that was most interesting about Surviving Mars, which is the expansion to me, is that it's being developed in tandem with Paradox Interactive, which is not something we talk about a whole lot on the podcast because they are mostly into video games. They did Stellaris and Cities Skylines and kind of bigger engineering kind of themed games like that. They've done some other ones in the past, but I remember back at Gen Con, we had a meeting with them. They showed off Crusader Kings, the board game, which is obviously a board game implementation of their video game.
Obviously.
So, yeah, I'm really interested to see what Paradox is bringing to the table on that expansion. Because if that means that they're bringing some of their high-level thought into On Mars, maybe we're going to have more stuff from Paradox Interactive in the future. And I know that they're making a Stellaris board game at some point in the future. That's been alluded to several times. I wouldn't be sad if Vital Lacerda was somehow involved in that, because I bet it would be freaking awesome. This is all stuff that I've just made up in the last 30 seconds.
Well, yeah,
obviously.
No, not the part that Paradox Interactive is working on the expansion for On Mars. That part is not made up. It is a bit cart before the horse, but you're jumping to a completely different cart at this point.
We're in entirely different versions of carts here. But anyway, On Mars, Eagle Griffin Games is on Kickstarter for another week and a half. And I'm probably going to end up backing this one because you do get a significantly discounted price versus the retail edition of it.
For those that are not in the room with me right now, a week and a half from now is Friday, May 3rd.
Good point.
That's when this campaign ends.
Yeah, so, $89 to back versus $129 retail. And with that $89 pledge, you get the super upgraded components, all the nice die-cut meeples, and I think they're even screen-printed, all this stuff. If this is a game that appeals to you, it makes financial sense to get it during the Kickstarter, I guess.
Obviously, financial sense is what I think about when I talk about an $80 Kickstarter.
All right, well, let me get off of Mars here. How about that?
I'm fine with that.
I'm going to move on to an expansion for Anachrony. It is called Fractures in Time. This is coming from Mindclash Games, funding at $500,000 of its $50,000 goal with 6,269 backers. This one ends on Tuesday, May 7th, so you got about 2 weeks left, with an estimated delivery for this of March 2020. The expansion is $45, or $60 for the expansion plus a new, they call it the Infinity Box, which is a box that allows you to store all of base Anachrony plus the, Kickstarter exclusive stuff plus all of the expansion stuff into one gigantic box.
Great.
You have a comment about how large this box will be?
That box has to be a very large box. Plus, also, it's going to be a very heavy box. Plus, also, no.
So this expansion is obviously for that big old game we talked about back in the 40s episodes or something. Anachrony is a worker placement game that is kind of kickstarted to excess with ridiculous miniatures that are completely unnecessary. You slide a chit in them, and you're doing all this resource management and stuff with the goal of gaining points.
Everybody says that the miniatures are the part of this game that was super unnecessary and over the top. I played half the game. Half the game is completely unnecessary. I don't need an expansion.
Yes, and I continually use time travel and definitely won a bunch.
Cool.
So it has this time travel mechanic, which is a super themed up and glitzed up, basically loan system, which is kind of the catch of Anachrony. You're a super futuristic post-apocalyptic world and everything, and you got all these resources that can fracture time, and you can send yourself stuff back in time and all that. But anyway, so in Fractures of Time expansion, there's some way to make your already placed workers blink onto a second action space, and you also get a fifth faction, and then you get this other board that I don't really understand. It just does even more tokens and chits and stuff to move around, and there's updated solo rules and more giant minis.
I don't care.
Yeah, so you ready for this? I was looking at the Kickstarter to prep for this, and I don't think I am going to back this.
Cool.
You're very excited.
I am.
I remember we talked about this a few episodes ago, and I really enjoy Anachrony. I had a lot of fun playing it. I know that you weren't super big on it because it's obviously super science fiction-y, and there's parts of the game you didn't really use. But I really enjoyed playing Anachrony. But I looked at the Kickstarter, and I'm looking at these modules, and I'm just like, I don't understand what's going on here anymore. There's so much additional stuff in there that I'm just like, I was fatigued looking at the Kickstarter page to understand what I was going to come on the show and talk about on this particular expansion today. And for some people, they're going to love it. I like Anachrony as it is, and I haven't even played any of the weird little modules that are in that box, so this might be the kind of thing that maybe somebody else will back it out there, and I will play it with them at some point. Obviously, 7,000 people or so.
A lot of people have backed it.
But if you really enjoyed Anachrony and you really like what Mindclash is doing, it looks like this is going to be exactly what you want. But I'm actually ready to pass on this Anachrony.
Cool.
We can probably move the box out of the house at some point. All right, I'm going to bring it back down at the end with a fourth surprise Kickstarter project, and this one is a little bit smaller and a little bit more easy to manage. It is the second printing of Doublesix dice. This is coming from Matt Fleming, funding at $67,000 of its $15,000 goals with 25-ish hundred backers. This one ends on Wednesday, May 1st, with an estimated delivery at the end of the year. You can basically back a dozen of these dice for $11, and then there's tons of other amounts where you can get different combinations or different sets of different colors, blah, blah, blah. Doublesix dice are D12s that are marked as D6s, and triple 4 dice are D12s that are marked as D4s. So if you want to have dice that roll better than a D6 or a D4, you can get double 6 dice and replace your dice with them.
If you'd like to have D4s that will not pierce your skin when you step on them.
Yes. I have some double 6 dice from the first Kickstarter. They're freaking great.
I agree.
Again, while preparing the notes for this episode today, I'm thinking like, oh crap, I gotta go find those double 6 and put them into our D&D stuff so I can stop rolling that D6 that I don't like and always gives me a 2. Get that D6 out of here.
You should probably get that one out of there.
Yeah, like straight up, if you have a need for dice in your life, specifically D6s or D4s, get some of these double 6 dice because they're freaking great quality, they roll awesome, and they look nice. They're really well produced. So, yeah, get some double 6 dice. That's a good advice for everybody.
We talk about how much they do cost $11, right?
Yeah. And there's all sorts of different packages of how many you can get and different colors to choose from and all the kind of things you expect from a fun Kickstarter dice project.
Cool.
Double 6 dice. There it is.
May
We're
1st.
done. We're done with Kickstarter. No more Mars in Kickstarter.
Or dice.
Yes. Can we go to the tree place? Park. Let's go to the park.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts.
And by go to the park, I mean talk about our first recent play, which is a game that takes place in our national parks.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have Bosk, a 2019 release from Floodgate Games. It plays 2 to 4 players in 20 to 40 minutes. It's designed by Daryl Andrews and Erica Boyuris, with art by Kwanchai Moria and Matt Paquette. This game is actually up for pre-order as of today. We were playing on a preview copy of Bosk, but we wanted to talk about it now because this is the time most necessary to talk about it, I guess. You can pre-order it for $45 at the Floodgate Games website, and also the pre-orders are going to come with some deluxe squirrel meeples.
Of course.
We'll explain the squirrel meeples later. But this is an abstract game of tree watching, leaf watching, and squirrel thumb throwing.
They jump.
Yeah, out of the tree. Danielle, will you tell us about Bosk?
Bosk is a game that takes place in sort of 2 different phases, which is good because the board is actually divided in 2 different ways. The board is divided up into different terrains, which are represented by colors on the board, but it also has a grid, which is laid on top of the map with the terrains on it. Mm-hmm. In the first part of the game, you are going to be planting the trees that you will be using in the second half of the game. Everybody's going to start with 2 sets of trees numbered 1 through 4, and you are going to be placing them out on the intersection points of the grid. At the end of the tree planting phase, once everybody has placed all of their trees out onto the board, you are going to look at the majority of each row and column on that grid. The number that is marked on your tree is what you're going to be comparing the majority. So if Jake has 1 value 2 tree and I have a value 3 tree, I would win the majority. But if I had 1 value 3 tree and you had a value 2 and another value 2, if you had put both of your value 2 trees there, you would have a total of 4 and you would win majority on that. Whoever has the majority is going to get a number of points, and whoever has second place will get a smaller number of points, and then you're going to repeat that process for every row and column on that grid. Once everybody has scored up their points, we're going to move on to the second part of the game. Everybody has a set of numbered tokens, which are going to be numbered from 2 through 8. They are going to select one of the tokens on their turn, and they are going to place out some wooden leaf meeples from one of their trees. You will place the number of leaf tokens equal to the number that was on the token you selected, and you can only use each token once, which is fine because you are going to be having 8 different rounds, so you always have a set number of rounds. The tokens are going to move from the tree in the direction indicated for the wind for that round, which is listed on a board that is on the side of the player area, and you are going to place out those tokens in that direction. You can move in diagonals, so there is a little bit of variability in the way your tokens can go, but you are laying them out on the different types of terrain which are on the board. Once everybody has laid out their leaves for the round, the tree from which they disseminated their leaves on this particular round will be removed from the board so it can't be used again, and you will set aside the leaf number token that you used, so if you put out 3 leaves this round, you won't be able to put 3 leaves out on any other round. Then you're going to move on to the next round, which means the wind will change directions and you will be laying leaves in a different direction from a different tree since your tree was removed. You're going to continue this for all 8 rounds of the second phase, and once everybody has finished their final turn, you are going to be counting the majority of leaf tokens in each of the different types of terrain. If at any point anybody has laid a leaf token on top of a leaf token you had previously placed out onto the board, they will then gain control of that space, but they will have to have spent an extra token to do so. So there is a little bit of giving up that you have to do in order to take control of something somebody else was on first. You will check area control for each section of terrain. Whoever has the most will get an allotment of points. Whoever has the second most will get a smaller allotment of points. And at the end of the game, in that second phase, whoever has the most points total from both the first and second phases will be the winner of Bosk.
We forgot to explain the squirrel. I think it's now time to mention the squirrel.
Okay.
So you said that their tiles 2 through 8 are pretty much what you're going to be playing with, but there are 8 rounds. That means the tile number 1 is missing. It has been replaced by a squirrel. And when you play your squirrel, you will simply drop the squirrel out of the top of the tree.
You don't actually
physically drop it. You just pretend that you've dropped it, but you're going to place it onto something around the tree that you were leafing from on that particular round, and it will sit on top of a pile, and it cannot be covered. So it's an opportunity for you to claim a square solely for yourself with no fear of possibly losing it.
And it can be up to 3 spaces away from the tree, correct?
Yeah, squirrels roll a little bit. Yeah. So I'll get it out of the way up front. Bosk is gorgeous. The art is so good. The trees look great. One of the issues we had with our preview copy was that 2 of the trees looked pretty similar, and I think it was like the orange and the red trees were pretty similar shape. Mm-hmm. They've revised that so that all of the trees are very distinct, which is very important for just fall colors to be able to see very quickly who's, what shape of tree.
Especially when you have standees for the trees, because it shows it throws a little bit of shadow, so you can't necessarily see everything really, really brightly.
Yeah, the production's really nice, nice scoreboard, nice wooden tokens for your leaves. The board is double-sided for player count. If you have a smaller player count game, then it has larger squares, so you don't have to worry about covering as much space. But on the main side of the board for 4 players, you have a lot of space to spread out, and 3 players, I think there's like a sectioned off. You will have 1 row less that you're sectioned off to be used in that particular game. And the gameplay is just as strong to me. I really like the way that this game plays in 2 phases. It actually, they say it's the 4 different seasons. You have the spring where you're planting your trees, and summer where
you score.
You go looking at the trees, and that's what the scoring is. And then fall is the leafing out, and then winter is snow, I guess. I don't really remember the theming for the winter one, but they base it on the different seasons there. But it is interesting because you are kind of planning for 2 different games with the same stuff. You have to think about where you're placing your trees in that first half of the game to obviously get majorities on different lines of view so that you're getting a chunk of points there. But you also have to be thinking about where you're placing your trees for the second phase of the game, because in that leafing out phase, the first 4 turns are specific trees. You have to do a 1 and then a 2 and then a 3 and then a 4 of your different numbered trees. And then the last 4 of those, you can choose which trees you want. But the wind is changing every single time. So you've got to really be thinking about where you place your trees so that you get good wind lines for later in the game. If you put all your trees around the outside of the board, and maybe the one tree is facing 1 or 2 spaces from the left side of the board and the wind is blowing towards the left, you're going to be out of luck. You've done a bad choice, and you're going to have to use your 2 leaf there, which maybe it works out. Maybe that's the strategy you had.
Unless you already used your 2.
Yeah. There's a lot of different levels of thought that go into this game, and you can choose to play it as deep as you want. We've played some very quick, kind of casual games of this. We've played some games of this where we're really just staring at it and thinking about the placement of everything, and I've enjoyed it both ways.
There are certainly different points of strategy that you have to consider when you're playing this. It is very important to get points in that first round, because you can get a substantial number of points if you have a couple of lines that people don't have any contesting trees on. If you have no contest, you're obviously going to get that maximum number of points, and you get a couple of those, and that can give you a really nice advantage going into the second round. But at the same time, you have to be really careful about making sure you have your trees spread evenly so that your ones can be not only in areas where the leaves can move depending on the wind, but also that you can reach a lot of different types of terrain, even if you only have a low number left, because it's great to be able to get your leaves on a bunch of tiles, but if you don't have the majority, even if you've got a bunch of leaves, that's not helpful to you in that second scoring phase.
I also really like the way you have to spend additional leaves to cover over other people's leaves. This is something that we didn't really think about in our first game or 2 of it, but playing it more and more, you start to see that there's a really big trade-off between covering over somebody's space and finding ways to weave your leaves in between other people's leaves as well. Obviously, you're going to be spending extra leaves to cover over other people's stuff, which means you have one less leaf to place further on. And then as those stacks grow higher and higher, it's going to cost you even more leaves to put more leaves out there, so that by the end of the game, if you only have like your 3 and your 4 tile left and your tree is completely surrounded, you're going to have a hard time getting anything out on the board at all.
Unless you're going over your own leaves, which you don't have to pay addition.
Very true, yeah. But it's really an interesting level of strategy, again, there with trying to decide, is it worth it to me to cover over somebody else's leaf, knowing that I then get one less leaf to throw somewhere else?
And on the flip side of that, when you're placing your own leaves out, you have to look around the board and see, okay, what tokens do the other players have left? If I place this leaf here and take control of this space, am I going to lose it on the next turn no matter what? Because if I'm going to spend 2 leaves to place on top of somebody else's token that's already there, knowing full well that you have the ability and the likelihood to cover it up on the next turn, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make you spend the 1 extra leaf to cover over the one that's there, and I'm not going to put mine out there because it's not going to gain me anything in the scoring phase because it will already have been covered. I also really like the way the scoring works in this game. There are lots of opportunities to gain points. Like I said, you're going to score every row and column in the grid in the first scoring phase, and then you're going to score every type of terrain in the second scoring phase. So you have a lot of opportunity to get small amounts of points, as opposed to, and this feels like the obvious comparison, comparing this to something like photosynthesis, which is also a game about planting trees, where you were making points in really big chunks, and if you fell behind on a chunk, you could really essentially lose the game by being off on the scoring pattern by a turn. But in Bosk, you have all of those initial scorings that you can get a whole bunch of points on, and even if you're behind after the first scoring, you have all the different types of terrain, and you can really make that up even if you make one wrong placement. You know, you place a leaf that you think is going to be fine, but then somebody covers it up, or, you know, somebody throws their squirrel on top of a pile you were really counting on getting. You can still make it up because there are multiple scoring things in each of the scoring phases, and I like that about it.
I will say, I was also very pleased how well it played at different player counts. 2, 3, and 4 players, I felt all played well. It was balanced at everything, and I think a lot of that comes down to the way that the board is set up, and again, like I said, having different sizes of boards for different players. And it's also nice to have different, you know, player count setup stuff without having to, like, oh, you need to take out a third of the cards, which is something I really hate in different player count setup games. This one does it really smoothly. You just flip over the board. Nothing else has to change. You're just changing the size of the board you're playing on. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate that. And I'm super excited to get a final copy of Bosk, you know, when this actually does get released. Pre-orders are up now, so it should be getting, you know, out into the world in the summer-ish of this year, is I think what they're aiming at. And I'm super excited. I'm sure you'll be able to find this at Gen Con. And if not, you should have probably just pre-ordered it and get those fancy squirrel meeples.
Indeed.
All right, well, that is Bosk from Floodgate Games.
Next up, we are going to be talking about St. Petersburg, which is a 2004 release from Hans im Gluck and in the US Rio Grande Games. This is a 2 to 4 player game that plays in 45 to 60 minutes. The designer is Bernd Bruenhofer, and the artist is Doris Mateos, which is actually the artist we normally talk about when we're talking about our Carcassonne games. We had to get her in this episode because she is not the artist on our Carcassonne game.
Hi, Doris.
This is a game of set collecting, card drafting, and anyone can become the Pope.
Yeah, at least if you get the card. So, St. Petersburg is a tableau building game that takes place over a number of rounds. Very simple start here. You have a central board that has 4 different stacks of cards on it. You have the green ones, you have the, blue ones, and then the orange ones, and then you have the 4th stack of cards, which is upgrades that kind of upgrade other free cards there. Mm-hmm. On each phase of each round, you're going to flip over some cards from whatever deck you're currently on. You're going to work through all 4 of them in succession, and you're going to place some cards onto these 2 different market rows below them on that central board. The top market row is going to be cards that you buy at first cost, and then after you go through all of the different decks, anything left over in that top row will slide down to the bargain bin on the bottom row there, that you get a 1-cost discount. The cards are going to have a number of different kinds of information on there. They obviously have a cost, which is however many in-game currency you have to spend to get that card into your tableau. The bottom of each card will either tell you the payout of either coins or points that card will give you if it is in your tableau at the end of its particular phase. So like at the end of the green phase, all of your green cards will activate whatever they are. Like the green cards mostly will get you coins, the blue cards will mostly get you points, and then the upgrades are going to layer on top of other cards to get you more money and points. very novel, again, idea.
Well, I mean, a lot more things were novel in 2004 than are now.
That is very true, and I think that's going to be very good context for as we discuss this game in general. Some cards repeat throughout the deck, so I think there's like a woodcutter or such that's a low-cost card, and if you buy an additional woodcutter when you already have one, it's one cheaper, so you can continue to stack up cards of the same type, which is good. There's also the upgrade cards at the end that will upgrade any card of that color, as long as you pay the difference in coins for, whatever particular fee, and then superpower that card, or basically replace that card for a lesser price down the line. And then there's also some cards that require you to have a specific card if you want to upgrade them. Mainly the green cards there. For example, the woodcutter can upsell to, I think, a log lumberer. Log lumberer?
Maybe. I know you could upgrade the shipwright to a wharf or something like that.
And the trapper can upgrade to like a furs peddler, something like that. But, those particular cards require a certain kind of upgrade chain while others do not. The orange cards also at the end of the game, if you have unique orange cards, you get a big, kind of scoring payout of triangular scoring or something. You want to have a different variety of different people cards is what it is. I think it's people and fancy nobles and job professionals.
Like the Pope.
Yeah, but you're going to continue to go through the game until one of those cards is depleted, then you'll finish out the round, and that's it. It's not a super complex game, and I feel like we need to really talk about this game in the context of 2004, because this game today would be a part of another game. I feel like this would be added on to something, and this system of stuff, and honestly, this system of stuff probably is in a lot of other things. We see that buying out of the market row a lot. We see a lot of the, I will upgrade my people a lot now. But this is one of those early games, 2004, that really paved the way for a lot of that stuff.
There are definitely things in this that I looked at it and I was like, okay, I see where this has been in other games. One of the things you can do instead of buying a card immediately out of that market row is you can take it into your hand and save it for later. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I know that. That's from something else more recent that has also done something similar to that. And it came to me eventually. The answer is near and far. Because if you still have cards in hand at the end of St. Petersburg, they're going to be -5 points per card that you have in hand. And that same penalty, well, not the same penalty, but a similar penalty is the case in near and far. If you take more than you end up using, you are going to lose points at the end of the game. And that's obviously not the main mechanic of near and far, but it was something that I played St. Petersburg and I was like, oh, I see something else that had that part of this game. The other thing that was pointed out to us by the person who owned the game that we were actually playing with was that this is the kind of game that you get really good at when you play it a ton.
Yeah.
Because the economy is really tight, you want to make sure that you're not taking more cards that give you money than you need, because if you're taking cards that give you money, you're probably getting no or fewer points from those cards. So you want to make sure that you're spending just enough money to get the things that you need, but making just enough money that you didn't waste money buying cards to get more money, because that's never a positive interaction. And it's the kind of thing where if you can play this game 10, 15 times, yeah, you're obviously going to be very good at it. And there's probably a very, very slim chance that new players are going to be competitive with somebody who has played it a ton of times. But I also can't see us going back and playing that game 10, 15 times. It's not really in our schedule, and it does feel a little bit like part of a game. Like I want more to put around it to give it, I don't know, maybe theme, or to give it a little bit more interaction that I can work off of. And I'm not probably going to come back to that game enough to be competitively good at it.
I kind of felt that it was too much to be a light game for, our needs. When we think about the light, quick games that we get, a lot of those are, here's 4 or 5 rules, that's it. And then, that we talk about that word elegant a lot with light games. And I feel like this game has too many different pieces, different cards, different numbers, that kind of stuff that you got to really know and really understand to be a light game. But it was also too light to be a game that I want to play for like an hour and a half or really dig into to get that whole strategy for. And again, I think a lot of that is the context of this game. This is obviously a game from 15 years ago and is well respected, and it functions perfectly well. I think the gameplay design is good. I just, like you said, have played other games that do a lot of these things in more interesting ways now.
Yeah, I also feel like the fact that you do need to essentially practice it means that it doesn't really fit the light niche that we normally look for. We look for games that we can bring somebody who wasn't planning on playing a game today or came to play games but is fairly new, sit them down and be like, hey, try this out, have a good time. This is the kind of game where if you sit them down with players who know what they're doing, they're not going to be competitive. So that doesn't really fit the niche for us. I do like the fact that you do have to look at sort of two different sides of the same coin, where with the green cards, you really want to get a lot of the same ones because A, that allows you to upgrade stuff without losing that power, because when you upgrade something, you remove the initial card. So if I have a shipwright and I upgrade it to a wharf, I now no longer have that shipwright. So you want to get a lot of the same ones because they're cheaper and because it allows you to upgrade. But with those orange cards, you are incentivized not to get the same cards, even though you do still get the discount, because you're going to get a huge chunk of points at the end if you have variability among your orange cards. And I think if you have 10 different orange cards, which is a lot, but the person we were playing with was able to do that, you get 55 points at the end of the game, which was, I think, like a third of the scoring in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Just from having that variability. So you have to be thinking, I want similar, but sometimes I want different, which was interesting.
Yeah, I really appreciated playing St. Petersburg. It's something that I'm glad to have played. While I'm probably not going to seek it out again, like I'm not going to go buy a copy. I don't need this in my collection. If it was at a convention and you have an opportunity to play this, like if you're looking for literally anything to do at Geekway and you just want to, play something that's kind of got that comfortable feel to it, it's worth playing. It's worth understanding. It's not a hard game to learn, and I feel like you'll get a good perspective from it when you play it.
I certainly agree. This is a game I like that I've played, but I would not recommend somebody go out and buy it if they don't already have it. I feel like there are games that are of comparable time that I get a little bit more satisfaction out of playing, but if you have the opportunity and you want to give it a shot, it's not a bad game.
Yeah. And that was, as they call it, St. Petersburg. Danielle, it's time for a contractually obligated trip into the CarcaZone.
I see we've changed the inflection on the zone.
Carcassonne. The Carcassonne zone. Yeah. Anyway, we've got Carcassonne Gold Rush today. This is the 2014 release. It's from Z-Man Games here in the US. 2 to 5 players, 35 minutes. Designed by our boy Klaus Jürgen Verda, with art by Klaus Stefan. Carcassonne, but this time, there's gold in them there are hills.
Told you Doris wasn't the artist on this one.
And this is part of their Around the World series as well, in case you were keeping track of that for some reason.
Which are the standalone spin-offs from Carcassonne.
Some of them. Yeah, I don't, we can come back to that later, but some of them are Around the World series, and some of them are just Carcassonne spin-offs.
Oh, but everything in Around the World is
sorry.
Okay.
Everything in Around the World is a standalone spin-off, and this is one of them. Danielle, what's different in the Gold Rush?
Okay, in Carcassonne Gold Rush, just like every Carcassonne game, you have square tiles and you are laying them out to create a map. I think that is the unifying Carcassonne statement.
Dice game!
Oh.
Bad Carcassonne!
I forgot about that because I put it out of my head.
Yes.
In almost all Carcassones, you are taking tiles and you are laying them out to create a map. And the mostly unifying feature is that you are trying to complete features on the map. In Gold Rush, you are trying to complete railroads, you are trying to complete mountains, and you are trying to, I guess, technically complete settlements.
You're building infrastructure around new towns in the West.
Indeed.
There we go.
When you place a tile out, you have the option to take a meeple action that will follow your tile placement action, and then you will receive score for any completed features that you have. That's pretty standard Carcassonne stuff. So how is Gold Rush different? Well, in Gold Rush, the railroads work like roads in regular Carcassonne. That is, when a railroad section completes, you will get a point per tile in that section of railroad if you have placed a meeple on. The difference is that if you have exactly one locomotive shown on the tiles in your section of railroad that you're scoring, you're going to double the amount of points that you get for that railroad.
What if there's 2?
No, I said exactly 1.
But what if I have 3 trains?
Then you don't get to double it.
No!
That's what differentiates the railroad locomotives from the inns that you might get in inns and cathedrals, the expansion for basic Carcassonne. Those, no matter how many of them you have on a road, it's going to add an additional point to the amount that you get for that tile. Well, here you want exactly 1, and if somebody else has a road or a railroad with 1 locomotive on it, you want to make sure you throw in an extra one just so they don't get those double points. The mountains in Carcassonne Gold Rush work similar to how cities work in basic Carcassonne. When a mountain is completed, you will, if you have a meeple in it, you will score points for the number of gold nugget icons in the tiles on that mountain. So if you have ever played base Carcassonne with any of the banners that you can get, I believe those are only expansion pieces, right?
The banners?
Yeah.
No, they're in base.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I don't even know anymore what's in base.
There's a lot of Carcassonne.
You know, they're icons that are on the city tiles. Well, that's the main scoring mechanic for mountains. Once a mountain area is completed, if it has, say, 7 nuggets shown on the tiles, those will be the points that you automatically get for completing the mountain if you've got a meeple in it. There are additional mountain scorings, but I'll get back to those at the end.
Mm-hmm. And it is worth mentioning that you don't get points per tile in the mountains, which is something that's very typical in Carcassones.
True. Normally in Carcassonne, you would get 1 point per every tile that has a portion of that mountain on it. Here, you're only getting points for the number of gold nuggets that are shown on the mountain tiles. When you are scoring a infrastructure settlement, you are going to, you place a meeple on it. It works a lot like a monastery would, where you are going to place a meeple and you are concerned with the surrounding tiles that are being placed. When you place a settlement on a named city in Carcassonne Gold Rush, once all of the railroads that leave that named city are completed, you're going to get 3 points per railroad. That means if a railroad loops around and connects to itself, it will only be worth 1 set of 3 points. And if you've got 4 different railroads that all complete to different endpoints, you're going to get 12 points.
Woo.
Then you'll get your meeple back. There is also farming in this game, but farming in this game works a little bit differently. You still leave your farmers to score at the end, but they will get 4 points per wild horses, which are drawn on the plain which they are laying, and they will get 2 points for Native American teepee that are shown on the plain that they are laying in. You do not count the number of completed mountains, which would be the equivalent to how farmers work in regular Carcassonne. So you are just essentially laying them out per guaranteed points which are on the tiles if you have the majority at the end of the game. But, like a lot of the Carcassonne spin-offs, you only get 4 worker meeples in this particular game, so you don't want to lay out a whole bunch of meeples to try and steal a field from somebody, because you're not going to have any meeples to lay for yourself. I said that there was some more mountain scoring, and I think this is the main difference in the way that this game works. Everybody has a tent meeple, which is different from your worker meeples, and can't be used to score completed features. Instead of placing a worker meeple on your turn, after you place your tile, you can choose to place your tent onto a section of a mountain that doesn't have any worker or tent meeples in it, and you will be able to mine gold points out of that mountain. When a section of mountain is placed, a number of mining tokens is placed equal to the number of gold nuggets which are shown on that section of mountain. Essentially, you're placing tokens equal to the number of points that somebody would get if they completed that mountain area. So if I place a piece of mountain that has 2 gold nuggets, I will place 2 tokens on it, and if that feature completes, it will be worth 2 points to the person who has the worker meeple there. When I place my tent meeple into a section of mountain, on a future turn, instead of placing a worker meeple on the tile that I place for whatever that tile happens to be for my turn, I can instead take one of the mining tokens from the mountain that my tent is in. I'll take it, it'll go in front of me face down, and that will be scored at the end after all of the meeples are scored. The mining tokens have 5 different possibilities on them. They can either be a single gold nugget, 2 nuggets, 3 nuggets, 5 nuggets, or they can be gravel, which are worth nothing. There are only 5 gravel tokens in the game, and there are a whole bunch of tokens, so the vast majority of these tokens are going to be worth at least 1 point to you, but they might be worth 5 points to you, and that's really cool. The other thing worth noting is that if you have a worker meeple on a mountain, when that completes, you will get any mining tokens which are left on the mountain, which A, means that the person who's got their tent there now has to move their tent somewhere else because there's nothing left to mine, but also means that you get all those extra points. At the end of the game, you are going to score incomplete features like with most Carcassonne games. What this means for endgame scoring is that any locomotives no longer double railroad scores, and all of the mining tokens are removed from mountain spaces, so you will still score points for the number of gold nuggets on a mountain that you have a worker in, but you won't get those additional mining tokens, so that's the incentive to close off your mining by the end of the game. whoever has the most points at the end of the game did the best gold rushing, I guess, and is the winner of Carcassonne Gold Rush.
CarcaZone.
Indeed.
It's getting to the point where after we finish our first play of a new Carcassonne game, I kind of have to sit back and think for 5 or 10 minutes, how does this fit in versus other Carcassonne games? And I feel like one of the biggest things that distinguishes Carcassonne games from other Carcassonne games is how it handles farming. You kind of have your classic A-style farming, where you lay your farmer down and they're reliant on the closing of other features. This is obviously base Carcassonne, and some of the standoffs have had it as well. You have the B-type farming, which is kind of this game, where you're reliant on what the symbols in your particular farming area are, but you're not super concerned with the mountains in this particular game or the railroads. You're not concerned with any of those other than how it interacts with your particular field. And there's obviously type C farming, which is there's no farming whatsoever. I think we've had that in 1 or 2 of the Carcassonnes.
Yes, we mercifully have.
Simply doesn't exist. But I've always been a bigger fan of the type A farming because I just like to, kind of finagle around and move around stuff. But you said in your description there, one of the reasons that type B farming is a lot better for everybody is that you can't finagle around when you only have 4 meeples. You're really limited with the number of meeples you have in this particular spinoff and a number of other ones that if this had type A farming in it, it would be unmanageable and you would not really be able to get the strategic depth of that particular part of Carcassonne. And I like that. I think it's great for a standalone game like this, especially with a limited meeple set and a limited tile set. There's no expansions for this, so you're always going to have your base 72 tiles. That it is that type B kind of icon collection farming. We talked about it in the last episode when I played the Ark of the Covenant. They have the sheep and they have the wolves that are negative sheep. They eat a sheep, basically.
I'm going to call wolves negative sheep from now on.
So, that's one of the base things to talk about. I'm guessing that you like this type B farming a lot better than type A farming.
I do. I would prefer type B or type C non-existent farming in my Carcassonne because it is a lot easier to manage the risk on type B farming, especially when you do have those limited meeples. When you place a farmer out in Carcassonne Gold Rush, you know that if you maintain control of that farm, you are going to get at least X number of points, which is the number of horse points and TP points that are already on the board at that point. They don't go away. You don't have to worry about them not completing, which is the case with regular farmers. If you don't complete a city that's in a field with base Carcassonne farming, it doesn't score you any points. Here, the points that are available can only be added to, and as long as you maintain control of the field, you already know, is it worth me committing a meeple for the rest of the game? Well, I see there's already 6 points here, so I'm going to get at least 6 points unless somebody manages to steal this from me. And if they do, they're going to have to commit half of their meeples to trying to steal this one field from me, which is not super likely. It's much more likely that you are going to tie, in which case everybody gets the points. But, it feels like less of a gamble, and I like that about it. And with the likelihood of it being stolen, it feels less like I'm being absolutely screwed out of points at the end of the game, like playing base Carcassonne with farmers with you does.
I would really say when playing type B farming, specifically this, now that I'm really thinking about it in that fashion, I have no fear of my farm ever getting stolen in this game because it doesn't make sense to spend 2 meeples to try to steal somebody's farm when you could just put 1 in there, have equal points, and use your second one for additional points somewhere else.
Perhaps a different farm.
Yeah, and we had, in this 5-player game we just played, one farm had 3 different people's meeples in it, and another farm had 2 different people's meeples in it. People's meeples is fun to say.
It is fun to say.
So I'm never concerned about having my farm taken away from me in these particular style of games, and I like that. I feel like for the quick Carcassonne game, that works a lot better. When I'm playing base Carcassonne with 2 expansions, I enjoy the farming a lot in that, but I'm glad that they've taken new routes with it in these around the world and other versions of it. The other thing that's always been a major distinction for me about the Carcassonne spin-offs is how they change the scoring, because I feel like that's one of the, the big things. I think 1 or 2 episodes ago we talked about Carcassonne expansions either change the scoring or change the way your meeples work drastically, and they always have some kind of balance. But this one overall changes the scoring for pretty much everything. We have the way that the farmers score differently with, the icon collection. The gold nugget thing is very different, and then being able to mine other people's gold nuggets to get the points that way. And then you're not concerned so much about the number of tiles in your mountains as you would be number of tiles in a city or something in base Carcassonne. And then the only one locomotive changes or doubles your score versus in inns and cathedrals, every single one adds that 1 point bonus, not cumulative, but you know what I mean? Like, It doesn't matter if you have more than one. So this one really focuses in on changing the scoring a lot. And then you obviously have that tent, which is super cool as well.
You also change the scoring on the settlements, which are the monastery equivalent, where you don't necessarily finish the scoring when you have it completely surrounded. You need to actually finish all of the railroads. So it doesn't have to be completely surrounded if that doesn't mean that. I mean, there are certainly some that only have 3 railroads coming out of them. So there's no reason to put stuff on that backside if you don't need to do it to complete your railroads. But it does mean that you can have a meeple tied up there for a really long period of time and not get a whole ton of points out of it, because you only get the meeple back once all those railroads are completed.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to draw railroad tiles to get everything completed, especially in a higher player game where you're going to have fewer tiles under your control, you might just have that guy stuck there and you get 3 points at the end of the game and you're like, well, that was not worth it.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened to me in our 5-player game. I had one person on a city probably 80% of the game and was very late game. I was able to complete that and get that out. I got my 12 points, which is nice, but it was 3/4 of the way through the game when I literally scored my first points in that 5-player game. And that's crazy, but it's my own fault. I could have planned better for that.
Now, I will say that unlike Carcassonne Safari, which had a lot of the baobab trees, which were the monastery equivalent, there are only, I think, 6 settlements in this game. So you're not going to be drawing a ton of these settlements, which are meeple tie-up spaces. You'll draw a couple of them, but if you don't put your meeple on them, it's not the end of the world. You might not even have to worry about that scoring mechanism.
The other major scoring change in this one to me relates to those golden nugget tiles.
Obviously, yeah.
This is one of the, I can't think of another Carcassonne that has so many secret points that you don't find out till the end of the game. When you mine gold nugget tokens, you put them face down in front of you. So at the end of the game, I think, in the 5-player game, Daniel flipped up 35 points or something in the gold nuggets. And that's a lot of points in this game. We haven't really seen Carcassonne play with secret scoring much until this. And it definitely changes the way the game feels, because you're never really sure if you're in the lead or not.
Well, the other thing is you can look at how many tokens somebody has in front of them and sort of surmise what their endgame scoring is going to look like based on just the number of tokens.
Yeah.
Because there are only, I think it's 5 or possibly 6 tokens that are worth nothing. So, if somebody's got 20 tokens in front of them, they're scoring at least 14 of those.
Yeah.
And that's at least 14 points. But more than likely, they've got a couple that are worth 2, 3, even 5. There are 2 5 tokens in the game. So if somebody's got a ton of those tokens, they're going to be lumping that endgame scoring in. And in that 5-player game, I looked around the table at one point and I had, a handful of tokens. You had a handful. The other 2 players we were playing with, Tamara and Steven, had a good number, more than you and I did. But I looked over at Daniel, and he had a whole pile of them in front of him. I was like, oh, this is going to be bad at the end of the game.
Unsurprisingly, Daniel won that game of Carcassonne.
But, you can look at the other player's number of tokens and adjust who you are not collaborating with, but looking to split points with accordingly. Like we had talked about earlier, if there are 2 farmers in the same field, they're both going to score the points. Well, I was in both of those fields that had multiple farmers in that game. One of them was with Daniel, and one of them was with the other player, Tamara. And as I drew additional TPs and horse tiles, I was putting them in the field with Tamara because I was like, he's going to get a whole bunch of points at the end of the game. And I think she ended up beating him in the end of the game, so it was probably not the best strategy. But at the time, I was like, oh, I don't want to give him more end game points when he's already got a whole ton of them in front of him.
Yeah, it's a very interesting version of Carcassonne. I'm definitely pleased to have this one, and I feel like this is one that I would rotate out frequently for just the one-off games.
Certainly. I also like the fact that it gives you something to do when the tile that you've drawn is not what you wanted, which in a higher player count game is excellent because you're drawing fewer tiles. But a lot of Carcassonnes try to find something to do that makes your turn worthwhile, even if you didn't draw the tile you wanted, because that can be a problem in base Carcassonne. Here, you have the option to place a worker on the tile that you've just placed out on the board, but you have two additional options. You can use your turn to move your tent to a mountain that has tokens, or you can use your turn to take tokens from the mountain that your tent is in. So even if you draw maybe you draw one of those settlements that you get points for when all the railroads are connected, and you don't want to mess with that. That's fine. I don't feel like I wasted my turn. Okay, I'll just take a token off this mountain. Maybe I got 5 points from that token. It feels like no matter what I'm doing, I can do something that is furthering my cause. And I know I've said that phrase before, and I like it in Carcassonne games.
So where does this place in your Carcapantheon? Carcathon?
I am not in any way prepared to...
Is this a top Carcassonne, a middle, or a lower?
I like this one a lot.
Yeah.
I think this was good. I think it's easy to explain to players who either have played Carcassonne before, but I think it would still be easy to explain to players who haven't played Carcassonne before. Maybe more so because they don't have the preconceived scoring notions.
Yeah.
And it never feels like you're beaten down. You always feel like you have something to do. I liked it. I think it was fine. It is not my favorite Carcassonne spinoff, but it's definitely one that I'd bring out.
Yeah, this is definitely something that's higher on my list as well, and one that I want to come back to again. I feel like there's more in there that I can mine some fun out of.
Boo.
Yeah? No? Not going to fly?
No, nothing in this game flies.
I mean, was the joke okay?
It's fine.
Okay. Well, I mean, Carcassonne Gold Rush. Good job. We've got, I think, 2, maybe 3 left to go.
I don't know. Every time you say a number, you find another Carcassonne spinoff. So I'm not going to number them yet.
Yeah, I just realized we never played New World. I got to find somebody that has New World because that one's hard to find.
That's all right. We'll get to it.
We got Hunters and Gatherers. All right. Well, that is it for the CarcaZone. Time to the feature.
Hey Jake, have you ever wondered what would happen if the moon, which was actually an ancient dragon god that was all riled up because warriors were trying to get rid of the gods, crashed into the Pacific Ocean and opened a rift that put humans in a post-apocalyptic state and mutated all the animals to have crazy abilities?
I can't say I've had exactly that thought.
Well, in Tsukiyumi, you and your friends will take the role of soldiers and giant boars, a robot army, mutated roaches, and the descendants of ancient dragon slayers, each using your own abilities to bid for opportunities to accomplish your, moon goals.
And when can I accomplish these moon goals?
Well, late pledges for Tsukiyumi are available at greyfoxgames.com right now, so keep your eye out lest you anger the dragon moon god further.
Grey Fox Games, quality games cleverly crafted. Okay, in today's feature, we are going to be presenting you with a variance segment. We come back to this every now and again when we've got 2 games that are similar in some significant way, and we want to do a compare and contrast. Obviously, this time with Star Realms and Hero Realms having the same base system, we can do a really good variance on this one because they are basically the same game at the core, but they have different flair that make each of them unique.
Indeed.
Danielle, will you give us some statistics?
Sure. Hero Realms is a 2016 release from White Wizard Games, which plays 2 to 4 players in 20 to 30 minutes. It is designed by Robert Doherty and Darwin Castle, and the artists are Randy Delvin, Vito Gesualdi, and Antonis Papantonio. Star Realms is a 2014 release from White Wizard Games, which plays 2 players in 20 minutes. It's also designed by Robert Doherty and Darwin Castle, and the artist is Vito Gesualdi. These are both games of deck building and fighting, although one has a boy and one has the blob.
Okay, Hero Realms and Star Realms both have the same mechanical underpinning, so I'm going to explain both of them kind of at the same time. They're both a head-to-head kind of market row trench-based style deck builder where you're going to be buying cards out of a center market row. The Hero Realms base box comes with enough for you to play 4 players. It comes with 4 starting decks of money and attack, and the base Star Realms box, which is like a single tuck box, is enough for 2 players that you can buy multiples of them to get it to 2 to 4 to 6 players, which is honestly true of Hero Realms. Again, we can get to all that later. But on your turn, you're going to have your hand of cards. You're going to play out in front of you however much you want. The ones that get you basically money are going to allow you to buy cards out of that center row. When you buy those cards, they go into your discard pile. And then the attack cards will give you attack points that you will use to either attack your opponent directly with the goal of eliminating all of their either authority in Star Realms or life points in Hero Realms. Basically, you want to beat the other player up and be the last person standing. Or you can use those attack points to attack the cards that the other players put out in front of them as either bases in Star Realms or champions in Hero Realms. Basically, cards that are defensive, that are shields and stuff like that, and also give you some actions. Some of the cards, like I said, will have actions associated with them. Maybe, like this one allows you to draw a card, this one forces the other player to discard a card before their turn, or remove cards from your deck entirely, which is good because in a deck builder, you're going to have a huge amount of bloat if you don't have a way to cull out your cards. There's also 4 different classes of cards. In Star Realms, I think the Machine Cult, the Blob, the Blue People, and the Yellow People. And then in Hero Realms, there are different kinds of classes or guilds or something. One of those things. Yeah, guilds. Let's just go with that. But if you have multiple cards of the same guild or class, there's a good chance that they have ally powers. And then when you have two Machine Cult cards out there, maybe one of them has an extra bonus for having an extra Machine Cult card out there, and you get to do an additional action. Your entire focus in both of these games is to work on building synergies in specific classes of cards so that when you get that really good hand, you get a whole chain of events that allows you to draw extra cards or take extra actions or get a whole bunch of extra attack points, with the goal of obviously beating up on the other player. Both of these games have a ton of expansion content available. Star Realms, for one, has 2 different further base boxes, Colony Wars, which is another tuck box size thing that you can mix in with your base little tuck box to go to 4 players and also get some cool new cards. And then Frontiers, which we talked about in our pre-Gen Con episode last year, that is the double wide box, kind of like Hero Realms, that includes startup for 4 players and also, a revised set of cards that have some new balancing mechanics and stuff. Hero Realms also has the campaign deck, the Ruin of Thandar, that we played a good bit for this discussion.
The Hero Realms Ruin of Thandar campaign deck is a 2017 release from White Wizard Games, which plays 1 to 5 players in 90 minutes. It is designed by Ben Chachowski, Robert Doherty, Darwin Castle, and Daniel Mandel, and the artists are Randy Delvin, Vito Giswaldi, Adam Lachmansky, and Antonis Papantonio.
Cool. So I do want to talk a little bit about how Hero Realms came in, because this Hero Realms and the Ruin of Thandar, plus the character packs we'll talk about, they were review copies that I picked up at PAX Unplugged. I had a chance to sit down and talk with Robert Doherty for a while about that. I've always been a Star Realms fan. I've enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed the Frontiers set and the Commander decks that we talked about, and there's a whole bunch of other awesome stuff. I have pretty much everything for Star Realms.
I feel like you also really enjoyed the app implementation.
Yeah, no question about that. The app for Star Realms is fantastic, and I really need to get back at that, honestly, at some point. I have my time at Porsche to play instead, though, for all my idle time. So when I sat down with Robert Doherty, I confessed to him, hey, I haven't really been paying attention to Hero Realms. Is it much different than Star Realms? And we got into a really good discussion about that, and he was able to tell me about all of the different things that were influenced in Star Realms later on by Hero Realms and vice versa. But he also made the point that he wants to keep the 2 systems distinct enough that they are both games worthy of playing and having, even if you have a affinity for the space or the generic fantasy settings, because let's be honest, both of them are very generic sci-fi and generic fantasy. I think they did a good job developing both of their worlds. Like Star Realms, the Blob is really, the cards are make sense in that particular faction, and in Hero Realms, the character packs definitely feel like their classes, so I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, but these are pretty bland themes for just general overall things. You're not going to have a theme that's oh, that's really cool. I've never seen something with space or fantasy.
But I have to say, and we can just talk about this as initial thoughts, I'm super glad that I sat down with Robert to talk about the game, because I might not have ever played Hero Realms, and I'm really glad I did. And I think a lot of that comes down to what they did with the character class packs and then with that campaign deck, which is stuff that we don't super have in Star Realms, but brings a really interesting set of mechanics into the way that it works. Star Realms has the commander decks, which I think is what you're about to mention.
Yes, that was what I was making a weird face at you about.
So the commander decks in Star Realms are nice because you get a unique starting deck with its own cards. You get some gambits and stuff like that that are, single use or special abilities that you have.
Which is like the character packs in Hero Realms, where you start with one single use and one repeat use ability for your character. So, the rogue has one that allows you to steal repeatedly throughout the game, and I think you can do like one big steal where you take an extra card on your buy row or something like that.
You buy a card out of somebody's discard pile.
Oh,
the
nice.
One-time use. It's crazy. It's like, that's a really cool ability that I've never seen
I'm
in Star
thinking of the
Realms.
campaign one. That's what it is.
But I think that the thing that Hero Realms does with those packs that's so interesting is only once you tie in that campaign deck. And I think that this is going to be the big strong suit of Hero Realms, is that they have this first campaign deck. They just had another Kickstarter for an additional campaign deck, plus like Ancestry and stuff like that, where you can develop your characters at even further of a level there.
Nice.
And I think it's worth talking about the way that the campaign deck works. Not only are you working through a series of missions, but between missions, you are getting additional power-ups and developing your character, much like you would in an RPG. Each of your ability and, I think, talent is the other one. They have a skill tree, actually, of different cards that you can choose to maneuver your way up as you get more and more skill points throughout the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think saying it's like an RPG is perhaps giving it a little bit more credit than it deserves.
Okay, fair.
Like, I don't feel like I have developed a character that I now know like I would in an RPG. I feel like my meat shield boy got slightly more meat shieldy by the end of the first game. Not a huge change, but something that's nice to have, especially since some of those fights they're definitely challenging realms fights.
Yes.
Like, we've played a bunch of Star Realms, and we played several games of Hero Realms before we went into the campaign box, and we were having some difficulty with the second level fights on some of the campaign stuff. So you're not going to feel like it's just easy chippy fights all the time.
Mm-hmm. And I think that ties into the other thing that makes Hero Realms really distinct from Star Realms. When I play Star Realms, I'm generally playing head-to-head with another player. When I play Hero Realms, I feel like I'm going to always play that cooperatively.
Well, that's why I had brought up that you like the Star Realms app, because the app does have a campaign for Star Realms.
Yeah, it does.
It's different than the one for Hero Realms. It doesn't feel like the same, like, going on a mission and going through to have a continuous story feel that I get from the Hero Realms box. But you do have a campaign mode in that, which is why I was happy to see that in this actual physical card game we had that for Hero Realms.
Yeah, the Star Realms campaign is good, and they've got some really interesting, spins on the mechanics, and I've always talked about that as really good. But the cooperative feel of Hero Realms, especially as you played, I think, a 4-player game?
Yes.
And we've played a bunch of 2-player games. It feels way different than the solo player campaign in Star Realms does, because we have to be really concerned about what the other player is doing and what kind of challenges each other player is facing. So you played with 4 players a few of these, campaign style games.
I did.
And how did adjacency work for you? Because in a 2-player game, obviously, we're all adjacent to each other. Did the adjacency rules come up? And I guess we should also explain the adjacency rules a little bit.
Go ahead.
In Hero Realms, when you're playing with more than 2 players, adjacency, as in who's sitting next to you and where the boss deck is in that circle, actually kind of matters, because everybody can target the boss, and the boss can target everybody, but you're limited to who you can help, as you can only help out players on the left and right of you. You can't, in a 4-player game, help the person who is opposite you in the square.
And you can play this with up to 5, so there can be an additional player who's not adjacent to you. So
did the adjacency come up in that game at all?
It did a little bit. Never to the point where it became a huge problem, because I think because of the way that our game ended. It ended before it would have become a problem, but it would have become a problem had it not ended. The idea that if the player across from you is in a deep situation where they're going to take a bunch of damage, even if you as a player have a bunch of extra damage that you can devote to it, you can't get to them. The way we just happened to be sitting, I was playing the fighter, and the person who was directly across from me was playing the ranger. And those both have a decent amount of damage that they can do. And that's why the adjacency didn't turn out to be a huge issue. If I had been sitting next to Nathan, who was playing the ranger, and we had a fifth player, I have a feeling we could have gotten into some difficulty where all of our damage was on one side of the table and we couldn't really reach the person who was across from us. But in a 4-player game, we were each able to sort of spread the damage out to the player on either side of us and take care of something. And also, you have the idea that you are moving in a circle on your turns. Everybody is going to have an interaction with the boss that you're fighting against. But, if you've got something in front of you that's going to do damage to you on your turn, if you're to the right of me, I can take care of it before it ever comes back and does a second amount of damage to you. So just knowing the way the flow of the game works is critical to making sure that somebody doesn't end up in a position where they are really hurting.
Okay. The other thing that I feel is going to come up a lot about Hero Realms is the way in that campaign mode you have that boss card and everybody's turn starts with that boss turn where they're going to activate minions in front of you and then also flip over a card and it's going to activate a special power. We've never played, you and I have played with the Star Realms bosses. There are a series of boss encounter cards that are kind of like big oversized cards like that kind of work in a similar way where you flip a card up off the trade row and it actually comes off the trade row rather than a boss deck. You flip a card up off the trade row, and then based on what that card it is, it activates one of 4 different powers. The difference obviously being that it's coming off of the trade row, so you're working with the basic cards, and it's going to scrap cards out of the buying game. Instead of in Hero Realms, you have a deck of kind of minions and boss-based stuff that you're assembling prior to each of the missions. The way the Star Realms bosses work also is very similar to the way they work in the app, where they're going to have their own deck of cards that they're going to be buying cards into for the most part. There are some bosses that function without having that deck so much, and they just draw and scrap cards off the top of the deck too. But for the most part, the Hero Realm stuff we've all had so far has been working through that encounter deck and getting the minions and stuff coming at you that way. And that is a drastically different way of interacting versus Star Realms. In Star Realms, there's not really any, these cards are going to sit in front of you and do damage every turn until you either beat them up or move the rubbish out of the way, or you were like buried under some tables or something at some point.
Yeah, there were some encounter cards that came out and they didn't allow me to attack anybody outside of my area because I was blocked off by tables. I was essentially pinned against a corner. And that meant that I couldn't help people to either side of me. I couldn't attack the boss. I had to make sure I cleared out these tables before I could do anything. And I needed a specific type of card, which wasn't really conducive to the deck that I was playing. I think you needed a champion, and the fighter doesn't have a ton of champions in their deck. If it was something like the cleric, who has, I think, 3 champions in their base deck, wouldn't have been a problem. But I was under these 2 tables with 1 champion in my deck, and I was like, oh, come on. I would like to be able to do some damage to help you out, because you were playing a character that had less beat up in your deck, and I just couldn't.
Yeah, so this again ties back into what I was talking about earlier, is that I will pretty much want to play Hero Realms cooperatively in the campaign from here on out. Because you have that boss deck, you're working through it, and I really enjoy the way that those mechanics work, having that deck come off and the way you've got to work with your other players to overcome those obstacles and really work your way through that boss in whatever particular scenario it is. Hero Realms face-to-face isn't different from Star Realms enough for me to want to play it that way, and I feel with the...
You're talking about competitive play.
Yeah, competitive play. Head-to-head, right. The base Star Realms, specifically once you add in the commander packs, which are much geared towards player-to-player interaction versus buffing up for a cooperative thing, Star Realms itself and the expansions and all the other stuff involved in it really is more focused on the head-to-head, while Hero Realms seems to be focusing more towards that cooperative versus Overlord deck.
We're talking a lot about the commander decks and the character packs for Hero Realms, and I want to compare those because they are essentially the comparison point for the 2 games. Okay. I feel like the character packs in Hero Realms feel much more like the character that I am supposed to be playing than I ever get any kind of feeling from the commander decks in Star Realms that I am a specific commander. Quite possibly because I'm more familiar with the idea of what a cleric is supposed to be than I am familiar with the idea of what a yellow-green, or yellow-green commander is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And there is some background, and again, they have built out the world of Star Realms. If I care to learn everything there was about the world of Star Realms, maybe I would feel like a yellow-green commander. Maybe. But I know what a cleric is, and I'm like, oh, I've got all these priests and acolytes that are around me. I've got this holy rosary that can heal back a whole bunch of points. Or if you're playing the fighter, you have a sword and you have a mace and you have a shield boy
and a bigger sword
and it does damage, or you can have your squire block some damage, and it feels like what I imagine it feels like. While functionally the commander decks work similar, they differentiate your starting position and give you a little bit of a different feeling to the deck, and also some additional actions which add to that flavor. I don't feel like they come through in the same thematic way, just because they're a significantly less strong touchstone for a player who may be taking that deck on.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the variety of decks available for Star Realms, I think there's 7 or 8 different commander decks, which all the different combinations of the way that the different clans or whatever they are can work together, kind of shows that that is more about the mechanical of it than in Hero Realms. Those character packs are the very clear classes. And you're exactly right there. And I chose the Thief deck for our campaign because I am playing a rogue in our D&D campaign. And it's just like, that's the headspace I'm in right now. I want to continue to play that kind of character. While in Star Realms, I'm looking at those commander decks, I'm just like, this one looks cool. Let's see what it does.
Well, the commander decks in Star Realms also give you the opportunity to run a specific type of deck, which is interesting, because if you play Star Realms a bunch of times, you're like, well, how would I play with a strongly yellow-green deck? Well, that's going to be a very different game than it's going to be if I'm playing with yellow-red or yellow blue, or, blue and green. And it gives you the opportunity to maximize what you're doing with that synergy. Whereas I feel like in Hero Realms, it's more about, like, this is the kind of character I want to be. It's not so much about how I can make cards interact as it is, this is how I want to play this game. I feel like the Star Realms commander decks are more about experimenting in the space you already know, and the Hero Realms character packs are more about coming into a space and making it what you want it to be.
So I want to talk a little bit about the cost of getting into each of these systems.
Makes sense.
Realistically, if you wanted to, you could go get a $10 Star Realms base box and just play the 2-player head-to-head all the time. But I wouldn't recommend it. I think the base game is fine, but it's also, 5 years old now? Yeah, it's 5 years old on that base, and I would recommend getting in with the Frontiers set right now, which is that double deck that allows you to play 4 players. So for comparison's sake, I'm going to say your entry point is the Star Realms Frontiers double box and the Hero Realms box. Both of those are $20 MSRP for you to play 4 players with roughly the same amount of cards.
Only competitive.
Yeah, only the competitive sets.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is the single Star Realms box is actually $15, so you're definitely better off buying that Frontiers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. If you buy it offline, it is $10.
Fair.
But MSRP, it is $15 for 1 deck or $20 for 2. So you're probably better off buying the 2.
So $20, you're going to choose your base set for either Star Realms or Hero Realms. But as you just heard, most of the best parts of this game is once you start adding in the supplementary content. Maybe you'll buy the $20 box to get a feel for the way the system works. But if you want to get a feel for the way it works, just download the Star Realms app because it's free. And then you can just learn how to play the game and then choose, which way you want to go in. Because again, base Star Realms and base Hero Realms are mechanically the same.
But maybe you want to play this game with somebody who doesn't have a phone. So, get
true.
The box.
So you've chosen your system. If you want to go into Star Realms, I would say you want to pick up some of the commander decks, which are, I think, $6 a pop.
They are $6 a pop.
And that gets you your unique commander with their 2 or 3 cards plus their start deck, and then, maybe 1 or 2 like special scorecards. There's 8 available, and you can pick any of them you want. It's not like any of them is going to be particularly better or anything than others.
Just more suited towards your playstyle.
Yeah, and again, you're going to be focusing more on, like, maybe you want to pick up 4 commander decks, so that's $24 on top of the 20 for 45-ish bucks MSRP. Obviously, you can go on the internet and find things at whatever price they are on the internet. Over in Hero Realms, I have to recommend getting the campaign deck, and I have to recommend getting the character packs, or at least the character packs you want. The campaign deck is another $20, and then the character packs are $5 a piece. Again, they're kind of like the little foil booster packs.
But there are fewer of them.
Yes, there's only 5 in the world as of this time. So right now, it kind of comes down to, do you want to play mostly head-to-head and competitive? And then I would say go towards Star Realms and get those commander decks. Or do you want to go on a campaign that's got more meat and a little bit of character, not development of character, but like skill development, and then go to Star Realms? And you're going to spend maybe $10-15 more to get the full experience. But I feel like the value is definitely there once you add in that extra stuff.
Okay, I can sort of agree, but I have to sort of change a little bit of that for my opinion. Obviously, your opinion, yours. Yeah. I feel like if you're going to play competitively, go with whichever theme you like better.
Okay.
Because there are people who will like fantasy better than space. And if you're playing competitively, I don't think it really matters that much, particularly if you're not buying either of the extra decks. If you're not buying the command decks or you're not buying the character packs. If you're just buying that one $20 box, just go with the one that the theme works better. They are almost functionally identical, I think.
Yeah.
If you want a campaign, you only have one option.
Yeah.
You are buying Hero Realms.
Yeah, you can buy, some challenge cards here and there for Star Realms, but there is no campaign to speak of in that currently.
If you are going to buy all of it, then I think you really need to assess how much money you want to spend. Because all of it for Star Realms is right now a lot.
Yeah. And thankfully, I guess for me, I've been collecting Star Realms from the very beginning, so it's not like I've dropped $300 all at once. But in addition to Frontiers and the character packs, you have the base box, you have the Colony Wars deck. There's been some foil packs that give you like special heroes that are like one-time use cards that you can buy in. There's things that bring in more bases, things that bring in more events, and there's scenarios, and like there's a lot of stuff for Star Realms. Never mind the fact that they've got like promo packs and like special convention-only promos that you can pick up here and there. Star Realms is massive.
That's why they made a massive box.
Yeah, there is a lot in it. That massive box that I have most of what's available, and I think it's only half full, so that means they got some plans.
Well, we can put our Hero Realms in it right now.
True. But there's a lot in Star Realms, and frankly, I don't think anybody except the hardest of hardcore need to get a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if you want to completely collect something, Star Realms, that's going to be a lot for. Yeah. Hero Realms, it is a much more manageable amount, I feel like, at this point.
For now.
For now, obviously. But, I mean, if you don't have a preference, I would say that campaign for Hero Realms is a really strong motivator for me to say get Hero Realms, unless you really love space.
Yeah. Well, I like space a lot, so it's not a surprise that I have all the Star Realms, and I honestly was very surprised at how much I enjoyed Hero Realms. And the biggest surprise out of all of this is that the two games are distinct enough that if you enjoy deck builders, there's something in both for you. I am going to probably continue going along with both of these systems. I like to play the Hero Realms campaign. I had some fun with that, and I'm looking forward to getting the rest of the way through that. But I'm also super excited about the way that Star Realms is focusing in that player-to-player, head-to-head sense. I think that there's been some really interesting ideas. I like the way that the commander decks work, and I feel like they have enough interesting mechanics that aren't currently present in Hero Realms to justify those as well. I like both of them equally, and I'm really enjoying both of them for different reasons, which is something I never expected.
I agree with you that there are some differences, but I don't think that you should need to own both of these games. And again, that's just a matter of opinion, and I do enjoy deck builders as well, so it's not just you saying, oh, I like deck builders more than I do. I understand how they feel like they are keeping these two systems distinct, but I don't really feel like the games themselves in the comparative mode, so if you're playing both competitively, are really that different. I mean, they are the same skeleton with different things added on top of that. So I feel like you just need to ask whether you want campaign or whether you're not going to mess with campaign yet. And that's where it comes down to. I wouldn't buy both of these if I had, from scratch to go with. I'd probably just get Hero Realms and be very happy with that. But that's not how time works. Star Realms came out first, and we bought it in the 2 years before Hero Realms was even a thing that you could get. I don't see this being a case where you need both.
Cool. Well, that is Star Realms and Hero Realms. And now, some Bureau Realms. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net.
So for our on tap, we are doing Hero Realms, which may be a bit of a surprise if you're familiar with the way we normally do these on taps, because we've definitely done Dungeons and Dragons before, and we've done Role Player, and there's not a whole lot thematically different in Hero Realms from any other generic high fantasy type stuff. But I took this opportunity to get some hero beers in our on tap. Not all of these types of heroes are in Hero Realms, but they're all heroes. So drink a hero beer with your Hero Realms.
There you go.
Hero Realms, obviously, if you have forgotten over the bump, is a 2016 release from White Wizard Games, which plays 2 to 4 players in 20 to 30 minutes, designed by Robert Doherty and Darwin Castle, with art by Randy Delvin, Vito Gesualdi, and Antonis Papantonio.
So, first up from Saranac Brewery in Utica, New York, we have Hoppy Hour Hero Mo.Saic IPA, which is an imperial IPA with one of the most cumbersome names I've ever had to read on this podcast.
Well, I mean, it's a collaboration they did with the band Mo.
All right,
That's why it's called that, and it uses Mosaic.
Oh, fine. 7.8% ABV, 90 IBU. This is a piney, citrusy, and tropical fruit aroma that you get from Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe hops. It's got a big hop flavor, and it's available on draft and in bottles.
I have a feeling if you ordered from your bartender just a Hoppy Hour Hero, they would know what you were talking about if it were on tap.
Nope. Hoppy Hour Hero, Mo.Saic IPA.
They would think you were a nerd, is what they would think.
I am a nerd.
Next up from Cambridge Brewing Company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, we have Working Class Hero, which is a Saison that comes in at 4.75% ABV and 75 IBU. It's a citrusy, clean, dry Saison, and they have a quote that it is a liquid reward for heroic people everywhere who take pride in an honest day's work. This is available in cans and on draft all over the New England region.
Mm-hmm.
Probably down into the Mid-Atlantic a little bit.
Next up from Trim Tab Brewing Company in Birmingham, Alabama, Breakfast Hero. It's an imperial milk stout, 8.5% ABV, 35 IBU, and allegedly, it's a donut stout. This one is mapley, so say the talkings on Untapped, and it's available in cans.
What do you mean, allegedly, it's a donut stout?
Well, I mean, the info for it was, it's a donut stout.
Ah.
So, that's really all I had to go on.
I mean, we have a very much a love of a different donut stout in this house, so I'm willing to give another donut stout a chance.
I will eat any beer. What? No, I will drink a donut stout. There we go.
There we go. That sounds less weird.
Moving on.
From 101 North Brewing Company in Petaluma, California, we have Heroin. That is heroin with an E. It's an American IPA that comes in at 7.2% ABV, 64 IBU. It has immodest hop additions that abound in this NorCal-style IPA. It comes in tall cans, and you should check it out.
Finally, I'm going to cover Revolution Brewing Company's Anti-Hero American IPA. Revolution's up in Chicago, Illinois, and Anti-Hero clocks in at 6.7% ABV and 65 IBU. There are many kinds of heroes, and then there's this one. This one is the one with Warrior, Chinook, Centennial, and Amarillo hops for a massive floral aroma and citrus taste. Has crisp and clean bitterness. You can get it in cans and on draft everywhere, pretty much everywhere, including Midway Airport. There are some places you can still get Anti-Hero, even though they replaced most of their good beer bars with AB InBev stuff. It's true. And also, you can keep out an eye for the other variants of Hero, because there's like a bunch of different versions under the Hero banner. Some of them are different, like hop variants, or they focus on a specific hop, and then there's different styles as well. Like, you got Galaxy Hero, Citra Hero, Mosaic Hero, Crystal Hero, Jukebox Hero, that was a Cascadian Dark Ale, Local Hero, Tropic Hero, Northwest Hero, Double Dry Hop Galaxy Hero, you got a Brut Hero, Everyday Hero, which is the Session Ale, Tribal Hero, Cryo Hero, Cashmere Hero, just to name a few of them.
Yeah, and they actually have these in different packages as well. Mm-hmm. They have a seasonal hero that's going that are their 4 like main non-everyday hero and anti-hero offerings, because everyday hero and anti-hero are year-round for them. but they have 4 main other hero offerings, but they also just started releasing Everyday Hero in 15 packs, so that's a new change to their hero line. And they also have these hero packs that you get that have 12 cans in them that have 4 different kinds, and one of them is always new. They are on the 6th series of them. I think you said that you had one last time that you were up in your up in Champaign for work. But they have 3 that were previously released, hero styles, variants. Obviously, I don't know why I have quotes around that, variants. And one that is a new one every time they redo this series. So that's kind of cool. They're continuing to make new forms of this and expand what they can do with this IPA lineup.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of Rev. They do some awesome stuff. Cashmere Hero was the one I just had, and it was another interesting, weird hop that I've never really focused on before. But it was a cool beer.
Yeah, I mean,
Rev.
we definitely, obviously, could have done an entire hero lineup just with Revolution beers, but that didn't feel fair, so.
All right, well, if you want more information on any and all of those beers, draftmechanic.net, click on the show notes tab, because that's where the information lives. Danielle, it is nearing the part in the episode where you tell us about an interesting beer fact or facts in what we call the beer segment. And I hear that you've prepared one for us today. Is this true?
It is a segment about beer, and that is why we call it the beer
The
segment.
beer segment.
Well, today we're going to be talking about spent grain, which is technically not about beer, but it is about a byproduct that always comes from beer. Because when you make beer, you use grain, and after you've brewed the beer, the sugar has been removed from the grain. But you still have all this grain that you have to do something with, and you're not going to brew more beer with it because the sugar's already been removed
What
from
am I going to do with all this grain?
Well, you could just send it to a landfill, which would be the most irresponsible thing that you could do with it. It will eventually break down, but it'll take up space and it'll take up resources getting it to the landfill, and you are creating a ton of this stuff. One of the estimates that I saw was a pound of grain per 6-pack of beer. So you're talking about, over the yearly production of a regional brewery, you're talking about huge amounts of grain.
That's a big number.
You should do something besides send it to a landfill.
Don't do that thing.
You have a bunch of different options. Mostly what breweries do is that they work with farmers that are in their local area to use the grain in one of 2 different kinds of ways. You can feed it to animals. This is great. You can feed your cows, feed your chickens, feed whatever you need to feed that is an animal with this spent grain. When the grain comes out of the brewing process, it is obviously wet because you just brewed beer with it and you strained it out of the beer. And you can send it to animal feed. They can use it fairly quickly on the turnover because animals need to eat every day.
It's true.
You can also take this wet grain and you can send it to a farm and they can compost it into fertilizer to make their grains grow better, or whatever they're growing grow better. Now, not everybody has access to these options for agriculture. Maybe because they're already being fulfilled by somebody else's spent grain. We're actually reaching the point where there is so much spent grain, not everybody's local farmers need it. The other thing is, not all breweries are in places that have local farmers. One of the people that I was reading about when I was looking up spent grain spent grain utilization methods, was saying that with the rise of all these urban breweries, like cities that have 10, 15, 20, 30, keep going if you're looking at Chicago, these cities don't necessarily have all close farmers that they can send all these spent grains to on a regular basis. And because they're wet, they have a fairly quick turnover time because you got to use them before they get moldy or gross. The other situation that I found out was the situation that Alaska Brewing found themselves in, which is that there's not a whole lot of agriculture in Alaska. There's a very short growing season, so it can't use all of the spent grain for fertilizer, and there's not a whole lot of livestock agriculture up there because it's Alaska. It's very cold.
Very cold. Don't want to be there.
So what they were doing was that they were paying to ship the spent grain down to the lower 48 so that it could be used in agriculture in Washington, where there is plenty of agriculture and they could use the spent grain. Problem is, A, you need to pay to ship it there. B, you need to ship it there, which is an environmental impact that people don't often think about. But when you put stuff on a truck, that truck creates more pollution. And C, they couldn't get it there quick enough that it wasn't rotting by the time it got there. So they had to start drying it out before they did anything with it to start with. And once they dried it out, they realized that another thing that you can do with spent grain is you can use it as a fuel source. They actually dry out their spent grain, and it essentially breaks down during the drying out process to what they called a sawdust. And they use it to power their boiler, which heats the water for their brewery.
Nice.
So you can use it as an additional power source because it still has lots of material that can be burned. It just doesn't have the sugars in it. Once you dry out that grain, another thing you can do with it is that you can break it down into flour. There is a company called Regrained that I found an article about in Entrepreneur that is actually taking spent grain from breweries and drying it down and grinding it up into flour, and they are making energy bars out of it because it still has a lot of the they call it a super plus flour or something. Yeah, that is obviously marketing, but they are using it because once it's dried out, it's not going to rot as quickly, and they can use it, and it'll still have all the nutrients. And because it has gone through that brewing process, actually a lot of the enzymes break down, which is part of what brewing does. I talked about that recently when I was talking about sugars in beer, and it actually makes it slightly different in the nutrients than you would have from regular flour. So you can make it into energy bars for people. The other thing that you can do with spent grain is if you are a brewery and you happen to have an on-site bakery or restaurant, you can cook with it.
Yay.
Which is something that I saw a number of examples of, either being used in a bakery that just for sale to take with, or even places like Blackberry Farm, which is a very, very good brewery, but they're also a very posh hotel that you could spend way too much money to go. And they have all these restaurants on site that are using some of their spent grain in some of their recipes. And I think that's really neat because they're keeping it on site local. They're not shipping it somewhere. Mm-hmm. And it's being used to feed people who are paying a lot of money, just a lot of money. I have no other way to put that.
I would not be surprised if we see that at the restaurant at Forestry Camp when that opens up later this year.
Not at all.
There's your Burial Beer Company plug for the episode.
So I just thought it was interesting that people are finding all of this stuff to do with what is essentially a byproduct of what they were already doing. Like, nobody was out to make spent grain. There's not a spent grain industry, but people are actually taking this byproduct and finding ways to lessen the impact environmentally and also create entrepreneurial businesses with it.
Cool.
So I thought that was neat, and I wanted to talk about it.
Well, I appreciate that. That is a nice, interesting thing to talk about, especially since today is Earth Day.
Is it?
Well, the 22nd is. So tomorrow for us, but today if you're listening to this on day of release, and the 22nd if you're listening to this anytime in the future.
Well, if you happen to be a home brewer who does any kind of home brewing, you will have spent grain, and take this Earth Day message and use one of those options. Maybe compost it, grow your garden, and reduce your ecological impact.
Yeah. Time to close this one out. Let's move into the closing section of the show. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. All right, as I said at the top of the episode, next episode is episode 100, so if you have any listener Q&A stuff that you've been dying to know, or just random questions you come up with literally on the spot right now, you can send them to me on Twitter at DraftMechanic, or you can go to guild number 2470, or you can go into our Slack channel and share those messages there. I'll put up a link and a post everywhere specifically for those regards. But DraftMechanic.net obviously is your one-stop shop for all your Draft Mechanic needs. We're at Draft Mechanic on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We got all those usual things. DraftMechanic@gmail.com. If you really want to do that as well. We have an email address.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That's guild number 2470. And if you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we have a local game night. Our next one is going to be on May 2nd at Good Road Cider Works.
And all of our events are posted on our website under the events tab, or you can go to boardgames.beer/events because that's a fun website to type into your address. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. No, that's it. I'm done. We're good?
Well, as always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Ooh, the 100th round, in fact.
Indeed.
All right, good night.
Night.
Draft Mechanic, episode 99, was recorded on Sunday, April 21st, 2019, in front of a live studio cat who won't stop hitting the microphone.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey out there in podcast land, this is Brian, and I just wanted to invite you to check out my tabletop game review and preview video channel, Cloak and Meeple. There, I check out a lot of Kickstarter games, as well as sneak in some fresh reviews of published games. Come and check out all of the bad acting in my attempts to be entertaining in my intros. Stay for a game overview and hear my thoughts of the game at the very end. You can find Cloak and Meeple on YouTube at youtube.com/cloakandmeeple.
Punchboard Media, where we all
bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.